This is
Cast.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of my podcast, Podcast Racing. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the TV industry and how streaming has significantly changed how we view television, and I'm going to be talking about that with my good friend Roxy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good for the most part. Been keeping busy with this actually, with making and editing podcast episodes, which I really enjoy doing. So
Cool.
yeah. So let me ask you: do you still have cable? And if you do you watch more like cable television, or are you basically just sticking to streaming now?
Yeah, I don't have cable and I don't watch network television either. It's just the streaming pretty much.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
you're like most people in at least America, basically. Yeah,
Yeah.
or actually I don't know if I can say that with 100% confidence because I don't know the full statistic, but it is a fact though that streaming is the dominant source of television now.
Yep. That's definitely what most people are choosing these days.
Yeah. I don't think I've watched anything on network TV in like a really long time, like stuff that gets released on NBC or Fox. I just usually watch the day after it airs on Hulu.
Yeah, me too.
I want to ask you if you prefer with some streaming services and some shows, they'll well like Netflix with almost all their shows they'll release entire seasons at once, but with like other sites, especially Disney Plus, they release their shows like one episode at a time. And I want to ask you, which format do you prefer?
For the most part, I prefer binge watching. Like, even if it's not like a whole series, I like to watch like whole chunks of it at once. I think the most recent show that I've been watching like on a episode by episode, like when it comes out basis, is like Bob's Burgers or something. But like anything else, I usually wait for at least like a few episodes to come out so I can just binge watch a chunk of it.
I get that. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I usually prefer binging too because I'm kind of an impatient person.
Same.
I will say though that I think that binge watching though can hurt a show sometimes. Like you can like there have been times where I watched entire seasons on Netflix, but then like a week later, like I completely forgot about it. Not that the show was bad necessarily, but because I watched like all of it at once, it left my mind a lot sooner. Whereas like shows that will release one episode a week, weekly, I might get impatient, waiting for the next episode, especially if it's a show that I'm really invested in, but I will at least remember it for a longer period of time.
That's true. I definitely think like sometimes, depending on the show, like some of them have like a lot going on. So it's like I watch like a big chunk of it and then I'm like, wait, who was that guy? What happened? And it all sort of blurs together kind of thing. And like if I was watching it, say, week to week, then I can like absorb it more. I think I had that problem like when I was watching Game of Thrones, like I had binge watched the first few seasons and then like the later seasons I was watching like week to week. And I feel like I absorbed the information from the ones I was watching week to week a bit better than like the episodes that I had binge watched. But then again, it just kind of like depends. And I'm sure like if I had like binge watched like not all in one chunk and like spaced it out like 3 or 4 episodes at a time instead of just like during my whole day off, it would have been given me more time to absorb it. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it depends on the show too. Yeah, like I think that if it's a show that's like part of a like bigger universe, or if it's a show that I'm like really invested in, then I honestly like I really don't know. Like I think do prefer overall a bingeable format. However, I don't think that shows like Mandalorian and WandaVision would be nearly as impactful or memorable if they just released all of it at once.
Yeah, I don't know. Like with WandaVision, I'm kind of waiting to binge watch it because I like watched the first episode and then I thought like I'm just too impatient. I couldn't do this week to week. It would drive me crazy.
I get
Hmm.
that. Yes, I
Yeah.
do. I definitely get that for sure. I waited until all of the boys season 2 came out to
Hmm.
just to binge it straight because I loved the first season so much, and I knew that I would get impatient just watching season 2 week by week, which I'm not sure why. I think I can think of a couple of possible reasons why Amazon decided to release the second season week by week, whereas with the first season they just released it all at once. I knew that I would have gotten a little too impatient watching The Boys season 2 week by week, and so I just waited for all of it to come out at once. However, I think that I might have appreciated the second season of The Boys a lot more if I had watched it week by week because just binging it straight through, I did it was a bit overwhelming at times because of how graphic that show can get.
Hmm. I think like with a lot of shows that either like play week to week or if the season's going to come out all at once, I feel like they plan for that. Shows that usually come out like all at once, they sort of have like a flow that they kind of like built in to the like structure of the episode, so it kind of feels more like you're watching it all at once is the way to do it. I like because like felt that when I was watching like Netflix's Daredevil, like the first season of it, it kind of felt like you were supposed to watch it all at once, just the way that the episodes flowed together, if that makes any sense.
No, yeah, no, that makes sense for
Mm-hmm.
sure. I think that's one of the weaknesses of the Netflix Marvel universe in general, actually, was that they wrote each season to be like a 10-hour, 13-hour movie. And I get why they do that. And it does fit with the fit with the bingeable formats. However, it does make certain episodes extremely forgettable. Like one thing that I really appreciate about the shows like Breaking Bad, there is an overarching storyline, but each episode has its own kind of mini like subplots that makes it feel unique on its own. You can watch an individual episode of like Mandalorian or The Boys on its own, and you might be a little bit confused at certain scenes, but you'll enjoy the overall episode, even if a couple of elements confuse you. Whereas I don't think I can watch season 2, episode 5 of Jessica Jones, or like season 1, episode 8 of Daredevil on its own, because the Marvel Netflix shows specifically, like I said, are written to be like 13-hour movies basically, and I think that I get why they do that, but I think it did hurt that whole series of Netflix shows in general.
Like I agree with you. You really can't watch the episodes individually. It probably hurt like rewatchability. Like you can't just go back and watch your favorite episode. You'd have to rewatch the whole thing, and that's like a long commitment. But again, like I really liked that as a storytelling format, and it kind of like I don't know fit in. I used to have a lot more free time. Like I could watch a 13-hour movie in one day. And I know when like Daredevil first came out, I definitely watched it all the way through at least 3 times.
Well,
But
for me, sorry,
again,
go
it's like
ahead.
a long time commitment. So I see what you're saying.
Yeah, no, it's just that me personally, I don't like watching shows or movies that have too much like disturbing graphic content.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that shows like Daredevil and shows like Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad, I purposely paced myself a little bit because I didn't want to digest too much, all this like all the disturbing contents at once. An exception to that rule that I made was when watching The Boys. I binged both seasons.
Mhm.
I binged season one and season two in 2 days each straight, and I think that it was a very overwhelming to watch both seasons basically in like 2 days straight. And whereas with like Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, all that, I kind of paced myself a little, and but I watched like 2 to 3 episodes max a day, and I felt like it was a bit more rewarding uh, in that way. Not just because both shows are great, well, with the exception of the last season of Game of Thrones, but but it was more rewarding for me to like pace myself, and with Daredevil too.
I can agree because like there's some shows that I pace myself with. Right now, I'm watching Jane the Virgin, and it's like I've only seen like a few episodes at a time, and it kind of gives you time to like absorb it because it has like a bunch of ridiculous plot lines and there's a lot going on. So it benefits to like have the time to absorb it. And that is a show that even though it's on Netflix now, it was originally coming out week to week. So it makes sense to give it time to adjust to like what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting to binge certain shows that were originally released weekly, and sometimes I do watch shows that were on Netflix that were all released at once, but only on like 1 or 2 episodes a day. And it is interesting though, especially to watch a show like The Office or Parks and Rec, because I didn't watch either of those shows while they were airing on NBC. I binged them on Netflix three times actually in the case of Parks and Rec.
Mm.
It's interesting to watch like shows like these, and watching a show, you can tell that it was written for a weekly release format because they were released weekly. But
Yeah.
watching it like all at once, like I think it also depends on like the content of your show, because I don't think that this is just a personal preference of mine, and I get like I get why people will want to binge Game of Thrones all at once, but me personally, I don't think you should digest too many episodes with graphic violence or nudity or anything like that in one day. I think with shows like that, you need to pace yourself, whereas with shows like Parks and Rec and Office they do get risque at times, but in comparison, they're a lot more wholesome. So I think it's okay to like binge a show like that.
I don't know. I'd like with graphic violence and stuff in shows like gore specifically. When I'm looking at it, I'm more looking like the technical aspects of it. So I guess it's a suspension of disbelief thing for me. So it's like no matter how much I'm into a show that's like really gory, and it's like I'm still looking at it and I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool effect they did with the makeup there. Like, I don't know, I remember there are only like certain things will bother me with that. And it's always like this, not to get graphic on the podcast, but it's all like with fingernails. So like that'll like catch me. So it's like if you're someone who's like sensitive to gore in like a lot of aspects, I see what you're saying about how like breaking it up is better. So I can somewhat empathize with that, but generally like I don't know, most of the time when I'm thinking about shows that like if it's better to binge versus like space out, it's more like how much story are you getting like per episode? Because like with something like The Office is compared to like Game of Thrones, like all episodes of The Office are pretty much self-encapsulated. So like whatever plot starts at the beginning, it's going to be wrapped up by the end. Whereas like with Game of Thrones, it's going to continue into the next episode.
Right.
So I feel like things like that lend themselves better to binging than like things like The Office, where it's like you can watch a bunch of episodes in a row, but you really like you can leave and pick up, and like if like forget what happened in the last episode, it's not really gonna matter.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, no, I definitely get what you're saying. It's just that me personally, it's not that
Mhm.
I like it's not that I like refuse to or that I really dislike watching stuff with violence and gore and all that. It's just that I don't know, with stuff like that, maybe it's because of like how I grew up, like I watched my first like R-rated movie when I was 12, I think. But before that, I was like strictly watching like, kids stuff. And I think I was 11, 12, somewhere around that age when I watched like my first R-rated movie. I even and At 11, like even like at 11, I watched my first like PG-13 movie, and at the time, that was very intense for me. And so I grew up, watching as a kid mostly like mostly like well strictly like stuff for kids essentially, and I wasn't really exposed to anything more graphic until at a quote unquote later age, although some people might argue that I was too young to watch an R-rated movie at 12 years old. But I also have friends who were watching stuff with like gore and stuff when they were like 8 or 9. So it all depends on what you're exposed to growing up. And me personally, I feel like I was exposed to all this stuff at a later age. So even though I've watched a lot of stuff since then with violence and intense content and all that stuff, I still feel like I need to be not careful with like careful with watching too much of that stuff in one day, if you get what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying about like how it probably affect the different ways we grew up, like watching movies affects how we experience it today. Because honestly, my experience was a bit different. I know like a different time I was on the podcast, I mentioned my parents worked in the motion picture business, and that kind of like really affected me because like when I was like really young, I don't have like memories of like just watching movies straight through. Like every movie or TV show I watched, my dad would like do like an offhanded comment like, oh, this is how they did that, they filmed this with a crane. And like in particular, like even shows with like not like full nudity, that I wasn't like watching that as a kid, but like someone at the beach or whatever in a swimsuit, my dad would be like, oh, they had to sit so long in makeup to get like full body makeup for that scene. Or like things with like aliens or whatever, it's like, oh, that prosthetic makeup takes like 4 hours to put on, that's kind of exhausting. So it's like things like that really color how I view movies even today. So it's always like about the technical stuff, and I'd be like, oh, that's like an interesting makeup job, and I like can't really get out of that headspace. Like I can be fully in the movie, but like even then I'm still thinking about like the technical aspects of it so much that it like really doesn't bother me.
I got you. I got you.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing for me that influences me and how I view media is that fictional media is that I like watching complete stories.
Mm-hmm.
I with any movie, one of my biggest pet peeves about like movie watching is if I'm watching like with a family member or friends and then they'll want to stop halfway through and then finish the movie another day. I really do not like that. I like if I'm gonna watch any movie, I have to watch it in one sitting. I can't do that where I like watch a movie and then like finish it another day. Like I really dislike doing that, and that also is my same opinion towards how I view television. With with TV, if it's a continuing storyline, I want to finish up with that storyline as quickly as possible because like I told you, I'm kind of an impatient person, and I like watching finishing a complete story if possible in one sitting. And so yeah, I think that affects also how I view television. So I think that if the show has an overarching like continuing storyline per season or per the entire show, like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad, then I do like to watch as much of that as I can in one sitting, but also keeping in mind not to digest the violence and stuff too much. But like if it's a show like Office or Parks and Rec or like reruns of the good old days of SpongeBob or like stuff on the Disney Channel on Disney Plus or whatever, I'll rewatch old Disney Channel shows solely for nostalgia's sake. I mean, for entertainment too sometimes, but that I can be okay with, just watching like one episode at a time, a couple episodes at a time, because each story usually with all most kids shows and sitcoms, it's self-contained stories within each episode, and so yeah, that's just me personally.
Yeah, I think I kind of do the same thing, like watching something back for nostalgia. But if it's like something self-contained, like I'll just rewatch my favorite episode or like whatever episode I liked as a kid kind of thing. And I think I don't do that as much with like stories that are like you have to watch like a lot of episodes to get it things. Like I don't know, I've never gone back and just rewatched my favorite episodes of Game of Thrones because honestly I can't pick out any episodes that are my favorite because I just like remember the overall story instead
Right.
of like any specific story from any specific episode.
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I can't. Well, I can't. Well, I can't rewatch episodes of Game of Thrones because I'll watch it, think it's so great, but then be reminded of how painfully mediocre that final season was.
Yeah.
But but I do think that it is interesting. I'm kind of hearing myself talk. I did kind of present like conflicting like our viewpoints a little bit. Like I said that with shows like Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad, I like to pace myself when when it comes to because of violence. But at the same time, I said that those are shows with overarching storylines, and I like to finish all at once. So if I sound like I'm contradicting myself, what in actuality, I will confess, even though I'm 25 years old, I still kind of cover my eyes sometimes if it's like if it's like something that's like too graphic or and I also don't really like seeing nudity and anything like that on screen. So if it sounded like I was contradicting myself, that's what I meant. Where like I can, well, I do I have binged like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, but I haven't always looked at the screen continuously.
Yeah, I think it's fair to like present conflicting opinions because I don't know, I think my opinions have changed since I started binge watching shows from like to now just cuz like I don't know, TV's changed some and it's like cuz when I started binge watching it was pretty much all shows that were like self-contained and I was just like watching episodes like one after the other. But then like shows started to be made to like watch all at once. So it's like I think the first show I watched that was kind of like made to be binged was like yeah, it had to be like Orange is New Black because Netflix introduced like all the episodes at once, and that was kind of like a new concept when that show first came out.
Right.
Yeah, I guess like House of Cards was the first one Netflix did that with, and that was like kind of revolutionary at the time.
Yeah, oh, House of Cards, how that show, oh man. I
Yeah,
can't
I
believe
haven't.
I can't believe that I was once like a fan of that show. Like, well, I mean, it is extremely well made, but I can't look at it the same way because of you know who.
Yeah, let's not even bring him up. Let's not talk about him. Let's
Yeah.
CGI in a different actor. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah, just replace him with Christopher Plummer. Rest in
Yep.
peace, by the way. Rest in peace. But yeah, I don't know. It like I said before, it depends on the show. Sometimes I think that like sometimes even if there is an overarching storyline, I can justify waiting week for week to watch each episode because I know that it'll be more rewarding to when that episode finally comes. Like for example, I don't think that I would have liked Mandalorian and WandaVision as much if I had just watched it all at once. I think that the waiting, even though I am an impatient person overall, the waiting contributed to my enjoyment of the show because the sense of excitement and adrenaline and euphoria that I got from certain awesome moments that happened in the finale of both seasons of Mandalorian contributed to my enjoyment of the show overall. And so I think that even though I am an impatient person, with shows like that, it was worth it to wait longer. And I think that watching it week for week did help because yeah, I don't think because like not all the episodes of Mandalorian and WandaVision are great and memorable. There are a couple of forgettable ones, but I remember the quote unquote forgettable episodes from Mandalorian much more than I remember the forgettable episodes from like Jessica Jones or Luke Cage because not just because I watched Mandalorian week by week, but also because with shows like Jessica Jones and Luke Cage, they wrote each season to be a 13-hour movie basically.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You can not like remove any episode of like Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Daredevil like from the whole. Whereas like Orange is the New Black, definitely made to be binged. You can like remove individual episodes and still get like a complete story.
Oh, I would personally disagree about Jessica Jones and Luke Cage, especially in the second and third season of Jessica Jones. I think that you could cut out certain episodes of that show and it would still essentially be the same storyline.
No, I meant like you couldn't cut an episode out and have the episode be a complete story.
Okay.
Where like, because like you could probably tell the same story but shorter, but like that's just an adaptational issue. Individual episodes, they kind of have to like fit into the whole to make sense.
Yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, I agree. Can you think of any shows that came out on Netflix or Amazon Prime all at once that you think would have benefited better or had better like reception if it was released weekly?
That's a good question. Let me think about that. I don't know. Like Netflix releases a lot of shows. Like they release like competition shows like Nailed It and Blown Away. And that's something that could be like released week to week, but those are like reality shows without like a story so much. Other than that, I like really can't think of anything. It's a good question. I'll think about it and get back to you. But do you know any? Mm-hmm.
I gotcha. Yeah. No, I have the same opinion as you. Yeah. Just besides like reality shows, I mean, I guess like there are I could probably think of if I think hard enough, there are probably some other shows on Netflix and these other streaming services where it would have helped if they just released it like a weekly instead of what's it called, like all at once, like but the biggest thing for me is like reality shows like I love Queer Eye, but I would have been okay if they had released Queer Eye week by week.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like I could watch Queer Eye week to week, or I could watch it all at once. It's like, and then I sometimes just go back and watch my favorite episodes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What about the opposite though? Do you think that there are any shows that were released weekly on network television or whatever that you think would have benefited from releasing it all at once?
I think there are certain TV shows that were like coming about during the time that like TV started to do more like stories with overarching plots in like a bunch of different episodes, that I think if they had been made like a few years later, then like they would have like gotten down like certain ways to do that and kind of like embraced the like one big story kind of thing. Like, I don't know, I think like Lost in particular, that was like released week to week and they were trying to do like overarching stories with like a bunch of cliffhangers. I think like something like that could have benefited from like something being released like all at once, like even if it was like half a season at once, you know. So they could have like kind of, I feel like if they would planned for that, they could have like woven the story in tighter. But like the way Lost is, it kind of gets like lost like in the in between of like, is it an overarching story or do we have to keep it self-contained from week to week?
I got you. I got you. What I'm about to say is going to be very controversial and is going to make a lot of people very unhappy because both of these shows have very intense fandoms. But Rick and Morty and Westworld are two shows that I do enjoy. However, I think that both of those shows would benefit from being released all at once. And I know that I'm gonna get some people angry comments from Rick and Morty and Westworld fans being like, "What? No, the show is perfect. How it's being released is perfect. You're an idiot." But no, I know I'm probably gonna get a couple people like that. But I don't know. Well, I think that Rick and Morty and Westworld could have been released all at once for two different excuse me, for two different reasons. Well, Westworld and Rick and Morty for different reasons. With Westworld, I felt like, especially with season two, it had a similar problem to Jessica Jones, where there is an overarching storyline, but like individual episodes really drag. Like I feel like they with Jessica Jones and Westworld, they wrote an 8 episode storyline and then stretched it into 10. Well, in the case of Westworld, 10 episodes, and so there are moments that really drag and feel like longer than it should be, and I think that that really hurt Westworld, especially in its second season. I haven't finished the third season yet, but so far I am encountering that same kind of problem with season three, where it just feels like they had to have like, oh, well, it might not even been the writer's fault. It might have been HBO for saying, okay, you guys have to make 10 episodes, 8 episodes, go. And then they only come up with enough story material for, like, say, like 5 episodes, but then they have to stretch it out, to meet HBO's demands. Whereas with Rick and Morty, so Rick and Morty does have, like, Rick and Morty is more like Office or Parks and Rec, where there is kind of an overarching storyline, but each episode you could essentially watch like on its own and kind of get what's going on. But I don't know, just me personally, Rick and Morty overall, I really enjoy it. However, I think that the individual episodes, like B plots and all that, just aren't as interesting, amusing, or as funny as maybe some of the writers think that they are. And again, I really enjoy Rick and Morty and Westworld overall. This is just my opinion that I think that those shows and another HBO show, The Sopranos, would, in my opinion, benefit from being released just all the entire season at once.
I think you just want to watch like all of Rick and Morty at once. You just want more episodes all at once.
I mean that is true. Yeah, that is true. But especially in season four, I was just like, I don't know. I just didn't feel like it was worth it to wait an entire week for some of this or some episodes I thought were just okay or disappointing. But I mean you're not wrong though. I mean you're not wrong. Like I said, I do enjoy Rick and Morty overall. I'm just saying that certain episodes really weren't really, in my opinion, worth waiting an entire week for.
I see what you're saying, because there's like certain shows, like whether it's like episodes end on a cliffhanger or not, like an episode will be like totally mind-blowingly awesome and then the next one will be like, what's happening? this doesn't make any sense. This isn't up to the standard. Whereas like if you got like all the episodes at once, you could be like, ha, I liked this episode in particular and the rest were pretty good. But you're not like disappointed after a week where it was great and then a week where it's like, oh, disappointing.
Yeah, no, I have the same sentiment exactly. But I want to ask you, do you think that I think I know the answer to this question already, but and I'm pretty sure we have the same answer, but I want to ask you anyway. Do you think that streaming has improved the television industry or affected it like negatively?
I can't speak for like the entire industry, but as like someone who's like watching TV, I think streaming's helped because I can watch like a bunch of older shows that I loved and it's like I have access to them and I don't like have to just wait for them to come on. I can like rewatch my favorites and be like, oh, this is good, or discover a show from years ago that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to watch. So in that sense, I think streaming's helped. And I also think it might be helping creatively, like just like having different ways of telling stories. Because if it was all going to be week to week, it's a bit harder to tell an overarching story if you have to like build in a way to like reintroduce the audience to the story in each individual episode. Whereas like whether like Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Daredevil being like individual 13-hour movies helped or hurt the series as a whole, you couldn't have that with just like a week to week show, because like the sort of like backtracking and explainers that you would have to build into the show would hurt it so much that it wouldn't be worth it. So like I don't know, like a Daredevil TV show from the 90s would be very different from a Daredevil TV show that we ended up getting in the 2000s.
No, I gotcha. I do think that there are definitely benefits to having network television and releasing like episodes weekly, depending on like certain shows. Like I don't think that shows like the Chicago shows on NBC or procedurals on
Mm-hmm.
CBS are really fit for a streaming format. And I don't think that's just because of like how they're written, but because like those types of show plots that those shows center on, I'm not sure that's really it seems more fitting for a week by week basis more than just a bingeable format. And also I can't really imagine if you're being a sports fan watching like binging sports games on like a streaming service or something like that. Like I think that like sports like sporting events and the CSI shows or Chicago shows or whatever are more meant for like network television. But me personally, as someone who does like to who does more often than not like to binge, I do think that streaming it is a fact that streaming has definitely changed the TV industry significantly, but it is my opinion that I do think that streaming has helped. And one reason why I think that streaming has helped the TV industry is because shows now can be made that couldn't have been made like 20 years ago. And I'm not just talking about shows that could get more risque or graphic or anything like that. I'm talking about like stories that like genuinely could not be told like years ago. The most recent show on Hulu, Love Victor, which is the spin-off of the LGBT movie Love Simon. That show could not be made like 20 years ago. And yes, a factor to that is because, you know, people nowadays, especially in Hollywood, are much more accepting of the LGBT community. But I think another factor of that is on network television, because it's public to everybody, essentially, you can only show a certain amount of stuff. You can only do a certain amount of things and all that stuff. But, you know, on Hulu, you know, you could get away with like showing a lot. You get away with showing a lot more and telling different stories that you might not be able to tell on just regular television. And so and I really appreciate that like streaming services, especially Netflix. Netflix has its issues, but one thing that I like about them is that they deliberately try to find pick like stories that's that no one else is willing to let them share.
Yeah. And like I want to build off of something we were saying about like Love Victor and Love Simon. It's like Love Victor was the sequel to the movie Love Simon. Like back years ago, like in the 90s and before streaming, like the way the industries were working, movies and TV were a lot more separate. So it's like that couldn't have been made years ago. And but like now with like streaming services where like it's even strange to say like movies and TVs existing side by side, and it's like why wouldn't they, because you could see like movies come on TV sometimes, but like even that sort of existing side by side still kept like the productions more separate, whereas like now productions for TV and movies are getting less and less separate, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, the line is getting blurred between
Yeah,
between cinema and television, because television is becoming a lot more cinematic now.
yeah.
So me personally, I've kind of run out of things to say about, even though it is a very fascinating topic, I personally don't think I can contribute much more to how streaming has changed television. So do you have any final thoughts that you want to share on that topic?
I think I could speak more on like the lines, because like a lot of streaming, it exists over the internet, and so you get like TV used to just exist on a television, but now you have like web series and like series on streaming services, and it's like you had cable and you had network TV, and that was kind of like a big rivalry. And I guess like toward like the late 2000s, like 2009 or something, cable TV shows started to be taken more seriously, and then you got like built into streaming. And I think it's kind of like a fascinating evolution, and it's all still so new, so it's like where's it even going to go? What are the lines going to be between like TV and movies in the future? So I think it's like fascinating to look at. And I have no predictions, but like I like the stories that are being told now. And I like
Yeah,
that more
yeah.
stories can be told on television, even if they're not on a TV.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And something else, actually, one last thing that I'll say is that with network TV, you're kind of constrained into a limited amount of time in which you can tell the story of each episode or whatever. Like, well, there are exceptions, like HBO, but on like NBC, CBS, Fox, etc., the episodes, they have time slots of 30 minutes and 60 minutes, but a part of those time slots are dedicated to commercials, which helps, them make money and all that by showing these commercials. So you really only have like 22 minutes or like 48 minutes to tell each episode, whereas with a streaming service, or in the case of like HBO, they basically give you as however long as you want to tell the story of each episode, which is something else I appreciate about streaming.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like definitely other shows, like sometimes they do like creative things with ad breaks, but like when you don't need an ad break, it's like it can change the flow of an episode, so you don't have to build that in, and you can have varying times to tell each story, the story of each episode. And that's been like an interesting progression to watch. And I don't know if like in the future they're going to like build in ad breaks for the way that ads work on streaming services, but like some of them you can just like watch without ads, but it depends on the service, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And and I know I said before that I had ran out of things to say, but I just came up with one last thing that I want to say, is that I feel very conflicted towards the network FX. Well, FX is now
Mm-hmm.
part of Hulu, and FX, I really like that they they make shows that are that kind of push the boundaries a little bit in terms of not just like contents, but like what stories can be told. But my issue with them is that I'll be watching like like American Horror Story or American Crime Story or Fargo or whatever on FX, and it'll be a really intense moment, and then all of a sudden commercial break, it'll be like cheerful like Bounty commercial or whatever, and it kind of ruins like the mood of the show.
Yeah. And I think, and it's kind of weird too, because like from like an advertising perspective, usually advertisers want their ads to be played against like happy shows or like something that's going to put the viewer in a good mood. But like I've noticed with that, like with American Horror Story and such, the mood does not match the moods of the ads. And instead of making me not want to buy whatever the ad's selling, it's like, wow, I'm really taken out of this show. So yeah, I think I definitely had that problem when I was watching American Horror Story week to week. Now I just binge the whole season when it comes out to avoid that.
Right, right. But for now, I want to thank you for being on the
Yeah.
podcast.
Of course. Happy to be here.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you all for listening to another episode of my podcast, Podcast Racing. See you guys next time. Bye.